and are ready to feed our minds. Could I please ask you to settle down? Our keynote is ready. Thank you. We will now begin the next session on navigating an AI-driven workplace, from challenges to opportunities by LinkedIn. It is my pleasure to welcome Manish Sabharwal, Vice Chairman of Team Lee Services. Manish is a well-regarded public voice, an inspiring entrepreneur, and an advocate of labor rights. He also serves on multiple policy committees for education, employment, and employability. Thank you very much for your time. Over to you. The mic is on.
Yeah. So, in 1972, when Henry Kissinger asked Chow En-Lao what he thought was the impact of the French Revolution almost 200 years or 150 years after the French Revolution, Chow En-Lao said it is too early to tell. I think he was really on to something, because there is a disease among human beings which many historians warn us against, called presentism. We believe today's circumstances are so special and so unique, and no generation before us has ever faced these kind of challenges. And I think we're being infected with a bout of presentism right now in AI, in ML, in stuff like that. It's going to be very impactful, but we overestimate its impact in the short run. We may underestimate its impact in the long run, but we will see about that. I work for a people supply chain company. We've hired somebody every 5 minutes for the last 25 years. But we've only hired 5% of the kids who came to us for a job. So I'm sort of at the agony and ecstasy of India's labor market. The ecstasy is obvious. I'm a child of lower hiring standards. Kids getting a job with me today would not have got a job 5 years ago or 10 years ago. Corporate India is lowering hiring standards. But the agony wasn't as obvious to me because I was born on the 10th floor, right? We had a job fair in Jaipur. 80,000 kids showed up. I met 800 of them. I can guarantee if they were born in Delhi, Bombay, or Bangalore, they would have had a job. But they were born in Dausa, Barmer, Jhunjhunu, or Ajmer. So the two most important decisions a child in India makes are to choose your parents wisely and your PIN code wisely. Anybody attending this or sitting here today obviously did that. I hope you recognize that, and I hope you carry that burden in ways that you unload it. But I think the world of work is at an interesting crossroad. I don't think it would be anything unique, right? I must remind you that in 1924, there was an Indian-Russian economist called Chayanov who convinced Nehrus that small farms are viable because you don't have to pay yourself a salary, your kids a salary, or you don't have to pay rent. And he called it the theory of self-exploitation. Think about it a little bit about what was the theory of self-exploitation. It was not fully pricing your labor. It was not fully pricing. India's two shock absorbers for the last 75 years have been farm employment and informal self-employment. And both of them have really been built on the theory of self-exploitation. And the world of work in terms of our organizations going away. In 1955, William White wrote a great book called Organization Man. He was the editor of the Fortune 500 Fortune magazine. And he said, to get ahead, you have to work in a large organization. You offer your loyalty in exchange for job security. You largely work in an office, and you largely work full time. And one of the companies he modeled it on was IBM. And I remember reading or talking to the CEO of IBM recently. And he said 50% of IBM employees have been with them less than 2 years. 40% of IBM employees don't go to an IBM office. And 30% of IBM employees are now women. So you think of self-exploitation. You think of Organization Man being the pivots of the world of work. And in India, we have this unique problem of private versus government employment. Lalu Prasad Yadav, when he became chief minister, of Bihar in 1992, and he told his mother, but his mother said, "Magar ye to government naukri nahi hai bhai. I told you to go and get a government job. Why did you go and become chief minister? I wanted you to get a government job, because the only stable, secure jobs in this country are government jobs." So I walk you through the thread of these three, because in my mind, India took two reckless experiments in 1947. One was political and one was economic. The political one has worked out spectacularly. We created the world's largest democracy on the infertile soil of the world's most hierarchical society. We were the first country to give universal franchise at birth. You first gave it to the landed, then you gave it to the educated, then some women in Switzerland got to vote in 1972. But 3 million people in India win an election. But the economic experiment, we called it the 1955 Avadi Resolution. It was codified in the 1956 Second Five-Year Plan. Really handicapped our labor without capital and our capital without labor. So in some sense, IT, which many of you will admire, and I do too, India exported more software than Saudi Arabia did oil in 2021. But it's only 0.8% of India's labor force, but it produces 8% of GDP. While agriculture is 44% of labor force, and it only produces 14% of GDP. So our labor is handicapped without capital, and our capital is handicapped without labor. As you think about the impact of AI, ML, as you think about a new world of work, I think there's three problems that we confront, right? Because prosperity is about productivity. So will the impact of AI be on jobs, or will it be on wages? And this is a question which I think we in India understand very well, because since 1947, our unemployment rate has been between 5 and 8%. So actually, unemployment has not been a problem, and it's not a fudge, because you can't have multiple definitions of unemployment. You can have multiple a minimum wage is an arithmetical concept, but a living wage is a philosophical concept. And the minute you move away from unemployment to saying employed poverty. So I think one of the biggest challenges coming down the pipe is even more and more employed poverty, right? That's why I'm not always very worried about the impact of AI and ML, because what is the nightmare of the US? That 44% of the labor force will generate 14% of the GDP? Yeah, hamara kya bigaad loge? We are already there, right? I think that's important, because when you're at the productivity frontier, there's an asymmetric impact of technology when you're very far from the productivity frontier. So this is a conference in India. I know India well. Some of the stuff that we have, our labor market challenges, the world is catching up with it now, that people are employed, but they don't get enough wages. So I think one of the most important impacts, and I think the panel will cover this hopefully in more detail, is it really going to be a jobs challenge, or is it just going to be a wage compression? Is there going to be millions and millions of jobs at $10 an hour, $15 an hour, but there will just be very rarer jobs at $50 an hour, $100 and $200. And that's linked to what I think is the impact, which is we haven't answered, is will it make superstars uncatchable, or will it make average workers bring them to, or low-skilled workers, will it bring them to the median, right? Most of us study normal distributions. What is a normal distribution? Where the mean is equal to the median, which is equal to the mode. It's just a bell curve. But that's not how the world has been working in the last 20 years, right? 90% of salary in tech companies goes to 10% of the employees. 90% of venture capital returns come from 5% of your companies. A normal distribution is like blood pressure, it's like shoe size, it's like many other things that we see. But the way the labor markets have been working is superstars are big. A winner-take-all first came into music, then it came into sports. But now we're seeing the winner-take-all in business too. So I think clearly there's an impact, asymmetric impact on where if superstars become uncatchable, rather than what I'm hoping is that low-skilled people are brought to the median, then we have to think about the impact. And that is where the jobs versus wages sort of plays out. I think the rich versus poor countries, you'll have to judge for yourself. If you're close to the productivity frontier, is the impact more, or is the impact sort of differently? So in my mind, you've got to think about productivity in 5 units, right? You've got to think about it in terms of states. I live in Karnataka, my parents live in UP. Karnataka and UP have the same GDP, but Karnataka does it with 1/4 the number of people. Which cities you live in? If everybody in India lived in Bangalore, where I live, then India's GDP would be more than China, right? It's important to think about that. India's per capita is $2,500 and Bangalore's is $12,500. Which sector you worked in, I already covered. But which firm you work in really matters. We just finished an exercise with the World Bank in manufacturing. There's a 24 times difference in productivity between the largest and the smallest manufacturing firms. Now, if there's 24 times difference in productivity, you cannot pay the wage premium. If you don't pay the wage premium, you'll never be productive. So we get stuck in this low-level equilibrium of 63 million enterprises, of which 12 million don't have an office, 12 million work from home. Only 25,000 companies in India have a paid-up capital of more than 10 crores. So as an entrepreneur, there are two kinds of companies you can create, a baby and a dwarf. Baby is small, going to grow. A dwarf is small, going to stay small. India is a nation of corporate dwarfs. We can talk about what the impact on dwarfs is going to be. And then obviously on individuals. I mean, we already pay a 5 times difference in salary to a BCom. We will probably pay 4,000 rupees or 8,000 rupees to a BCom for feet on street telecom sales, but we will pay 50,000 rupees a month for feet on street FMCD sales or higher end sales. So I think the 5 times difference in salary could actually become even more. So, you know, in sort of summarizing my dilemma, I would like to remind you that I think please don't fall prey to presentism. I think that we still don't know the impact of all this. All technologies in the past have had positive impacts on labor markets in the long run. They have concentrated costs, but on some communities, on some professions. But on average, it sort of works out. I know there's a lot of views that maybe AI/ML is different from the past. But I think, you know, if you want to be a good ancestor for India, how are we going? We're not going to be able to predict the impact of AI and ML. So I think we need more risk-taking in policy. We need to think about where will the jobs of the future be, and at least start producing the human capital. I mean, I don't think we're ever going to answer the jobs. Does supply create jobs? Do skills create jobs, or do jobs create skills? It's a chicken and egg problem. You know, the only way to solve a chicken and egg problem is to become vegetarian, which is do something different. So I think we're not going to be able to predict where jobs will be, but we need to take more risks in human capital. I think we need more teamwork. It's a waste of time in a conference like this on whether the government should do something or the private sector. You know, the government may have an execution deficit, the private sector has a trust deficit, and non-profits have a scale deficit. One of the reasons India is poor is because we haven't had better teamwork between the private government and the private sector. And the most important one is sort of long-term thinking. I think that we have to balance the next quarter and quarter century. It is very tempting in presentism to say that the next quarter is all that matters. You know, I grew up in Kashmir. They distinguish between amanat and jagir. You know, jagir is yours, amanat is supposed to be handed over in better condition. And we've made huge progress in labor markets. You know, when I landed in the US in August 1994, there was a front page article on the Wall Street Journal that said that India is more interesting than important. I hope that journalist is eating the newspaper on which he wrote that, because what's happening in India is not once in a decade or once in a millennium, it's once in the lifetime of a country. But we did miss our tryst with destiny. There are 200 million people who will never read the newspaper that they deliver, or sit in the car that they clean, or send their kids to the school that they help build. And this is not because of unemployment, it's because of employed poverty. So I think employed poverty is something that you will be running into a lot over the next decade in India and all over the world. But I think employed poverty is not a problem like cancer or climate change. It's a plumbing problem. And it's a problem which I think we're on our way to solve from our productivity frontier, where so many people work in agriculture. They're never going to be pulled out of poverty. The only way to help farmers is to have less farmers. The only way to help wages is to have less self-employed people. But I think we're on our way. We created mass democracy, but we didn't create mass prosperity. I think that's our new tryst with destiny, and I think that's an appointment we will keep. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you for the candor. Thank you for the depth that you brought to this topic. I now invite the panel to join us on stage. Shankar Maruwada is the CEO and co-founder of Aug Stein. Shankar is a passionate spokesperson for addressing social problems through technology. He has been one of the leaders who brought Aadhaar to life. On his right is Puneet Chandok, the president of Microsoft India and South Asia, who oversees the company's overall presence and business in the region. He spearheads Microsoft's digital transformation initiatives in the area of AI and intelligent cloud. To my left here, we have Manu Chopra, who's the co-founder and CEO of Karya, a transformative AI collective that is enabling dignified livelihoods. I might also add that he is an alum of our social entrepreneurship program. Thank you for being here, Manu. Last but not the least, we have Meg Garlinghouse, who is the VP of Social Impact at LinkedIn, leading the company's efforts to leverage its platform and resources to create positive social and economic outcomes. Welcome, Meg. This session will be moderated by Ruchi Anand, who is the Senior Director of Talent and Learning Solutions at LinkedIn India. Over to you, Ruchi.
Thank you so much. Very good afternoon, everyone. And it's a tough one to follow after listening to Manish. Manish, thank you so much. In fact, I want to start with something that you said. You actually spoke about how do can we choose our PIN code, right? And there's an interesting stat around this, where you grow up, where you go to school, who you work with, actually increases your chances by 12x in terms of access to opportunity. And, listening to Manish, this came to my mind. I recently met a young girl, Amrita, and she'd lost her father. Her father was a driver when she was much younger. And she and her sister came from a very small village, which had a population of less than 1,000 people. But today she's an engineer because she got adopted by an uncle who lives in a bigger town compared to, how she's doing than her sister. So, of course, like we say, talent is everywhere, but opportunity is not. And that's something that, when we think about it, we feel that we all collectively have a responsibility to be able to bridge that divide. And when we say that talent is everywhere, opportunity is not, people may not have that access, but even for those who have access today, the world that we're living in, and if we look at what generative AI and technology automation is really doing, the fast pace of change that we're seeing, in fact, it's fair to say that our jobs are changing even when we are not changing our jobs, right? Because we have on LinkedIn, we've seen skills shift for the same role by 25% between 2015 to now. And let me tell you that for the same role today, it's going to shift by another 70% by 2030. And not just that, we recently had a Jobs on the Rise report. And over 68% of the jobs on the new jobs on the rise, 68% of the jobs did not exist 20 years ago. So that's the world that we're living in. We are looking at massive pace of change. So what does all this mean for us? We really need to lead with a very skills-first approach. We need skills-led workplaces to navigate these shifts, because the only way to prepare for the future is to upskill constantly. And the other thing is also we need to revisit how do we look at our jobs, how do we define jobs? Is it just by job titles, or is it collection of tasks and skills? Because there will be some tasks that get automated, and which means that it makes space for more skills that we need to be better at to be good at our job. So I'm excited to be moderating this panel because collectively we have a responsibility to democratize access and expand economic opportunity. And for us, I think the best examples, I must tell you one thing. I've spent some time with all the panelists, and you will walk away not just inspired, but also having a much greater sense of confidence with what we can do, especially in our country, even though we talk about a lot of complexity and scale. So talking about scale and complexity, let me start with you, Shankar. You have demonstrated that technology can be a leveler. I've heard you say this many times, and you've not just said it, you've demonstrated it with the kind of work you've done, and you brought, all the efforts have been to bring in marginalized groups and create a level playing field. So can you elaborate on how India can leverage the AI opportunity at scale? Because I think that's the question on our mind, and more importantly, benefiting everyone at the last mile.
Thank you, Ruchi. Good afternoon, everybody. In 1870s, Alexander Graham Bell and Thomas Edison, they both tested out and showed to the world the telephone and the electric bulb. The electric bulb was very exciting. It captured a lot of imagination. But what everybody missed was the real power in the electric bulb was not in the bulb lighting, but in the invisible electricity. It took us another 3 decades to extract the full power of electricity, because in that time, factories had to change their processes. Where they were dependent upon steam, it had to change to electrical power. So in the short run, electricity flattered to deceive. In the long run, we've seen how it transformed us. Similarly, when Intel introduced the IC chips in early 70s, right? Same thing. What can this do? In the short run, it flattered to deceive. In the long run, computers have changed our world. The same is going to happen with AI. The crucial thing in all of this and the role of technology is it makes something which was otherwise scarce abundant. It makes something that was premium a commodity. Power in your hands, electricity. Computing in your hands, the chip. So what is AI in your hands? It is the ability of a machine to understand you, to reason with you. And I'm talking generative AI. And generative AI is an overnight success, 70 years in the making. So with generative AI, a machine can now have a dialogue with you. And this capability will only get better. So that's the first point. What happens when such a scarce commodity of someone being able to understand you is now abundant? Anybody can have it. It's in a device. What's the impact on the workplace? And to answer that, if I break it up into work and place, I will narrate an anecdote. My son was watching a game on YouTube, right? So I was irritated, saying, what do you find in that? Why are you watching a guy playing a game? So he asked me, why do you watch a guy playing cricket? I said, oh, because it's a skill. So yeah, same skill. He's exhibiting that skill, I'm watching him. So I realized that the gamer is at work, he's not playing, right? So the lady is at work, cooking in the kitchen and making a video out of it for millions of people to watch, learn, enjoy. So the definition of work is changing, right? The definition of place is changing. The lady in the kitchen, the boy in his gaming room, right? Somebody who is out there on vacation, filming that and creating content, is it a vacation, working, workplace or not? So all of these are up for debate. And I think the good news for India is, given our demographic, given that we have so many young people who more or less are digital native thanks to India's incredible digital explosion, low data plans, high availability of devices, there is a generation of people who will take to AI natively, who will learn what you can do with something that can understand you, reason with you, right? And when society understands how to use it, businesses will adapt there. Farmers, lawyers, teachers, all of them will figure out how to use AI to improve their work. And this will have an impact. Of course, a lot of this is outside the typical LinkedIn realm of work, but I'm expanding the scope, building on what Manish said, that for India's success, for India to gain mass prosperity, we need to look at all 1.4 billion people. The future of this has to be imagined. We don't know the answer, and in the short term, we will be over-optimistic, and in the long term, we will be under-optimistic. India's advantage is, given the kind of digital rails laid out with Aadhaar and UPI and many others, AI takes that to a much higher level. It's a concept we call as DPI to the power AI. India, ironically, is the country most ready in the world to use AI, and by 2030 will become the AI use case capital of the world, because there's so much we can do with it. What it is, there are bits and pieces here, but it will take us 3-4 years for us to understand the possibilities, but it will be nothing like what we imagine. In 1878, you could not imagine what would happen with electricity by seeing the bulb, right? 72, you could not imagine what would happen with a chip. I think it's the same here, it'll be much faster.
No, I think well said, Shankar. In fact, not just that, not just going back that far off, even more recently, when what we heard in the morning and even what you've always shared with UPI, I mean, we were only 18% of Indians had a bank account, and that in 6 years reached 82%. So if we can do that scale, definitely, I think, and when I come back to you, would love to, maybe if you can share more examples of how you've done scale with Diksha, I think that would be good for the audience to also know. And thanks for actually asking your son that. I've never asked my 16-year-old, even I've never wrapped my head around how they can watch gamers play, but I've understood that now. All right, Puneet, I'll move to you. So considering Microsoft's commitment to making artificial intelligence accessible and beneficial for everyone, what's your view in what ways do you envision AI contributing to, reduction of this societal, I would say, disparity or divide? And I know there's what Microsoft's doing on AI for everyone. So if you can actually share a little more in terms of how we can address those challenges.
It's very hard to go after Manish and Shankar, and Manish, just incredible. Thank you. Your ability to make us reflect and provoke us at the same time is just unparalleled, so thank you, sir. I think just building on what Manish and Shankar said, right? In my view, and Manish raised a very interesting question, would it impact jobs or wages? I don't know the answer, nobody does, but I'll take a slightly more optimistic view. In my view, AI now has the ability for the first time in India to cut the cord between knowledge and agency. And I'll give you an example. You go to any hospital in this country, the first-year doctors are out of work, the 20th-year doctors are out of time. Everybody wants to go to the 20th-year doctor. Go to a law firm, same story. Go to a research firm, same story. Go to a farmer, same story. And if there's one thing that AI can do, and we're doing this with a few hospitals in India, where we're saying, can we create a co-pilot, an AI agent for a doctor, so the first-year doctor can have information, expertise, judgment, knowledge at their fingertips. They can do the same interventions that a 20th-year doctor used to do. Basically, the thesis is, can we reduce the cost of intelligence? Now, that has the ability to cut the cord between knowledge and 20 years of experience in agency. Now, to Manish's question, does that compress wages? Does that inflate wages? I don't know. I'm optimistic it'll inflate wages, at least to a certain extent, because the younger people, and again, just to paraphrase this, right, it reduces the floor and raises the ceiling. It reduces the floor because people can start a lot earlier. You don't need 15, 20 years of experience in technology to do what I'm doing. You can start on day one. It raises the ceiling because if you have 15, 20 years of experience, you can do so much more because it frees up a lot of drudgery and random stuff that you do. And by the way, we're seeing this in action. Like, look at what Karya is doing. It's just outstanding, always inspired by seeing them in action. Shiksha Copilot, we launched this with a team where teachers in government schools used to take 60 to 90 minutes to plan what to teach. Now they're doing this in 60 to 90 seconds. Now it's reducing the floor and raising the ceiling. Agriculture, agripilot.ai, just Manish spoke about agriculture, right? Just actionable insights to say, listen, you've got to grow this at this time of the year, this crop, this is where you get the seeds, this is where you get the subsidy. Information at your fingertips, reducing the cost of intelligence. So I genuinely believe, hand on my heart, that this is an opportunity for India to do something different, and all the problems that Manish spoke about, completely agree with them. In fact, they're even more stark. But if AI can do one thing, it's that. And we'll see how it plays out on wages and jobs. And that's why I think we'll talk about skilling a little later. But if there's one thing we can do in India today is skill India at scale on AI fluency so that people can start early and then do a lot more.
Absolutely. Thank you, Puneet. I know there's, we'll hear from you a little more in terms of lot that Microsoft is doing to actually scale at scale. In fact, since you spoke about Karya, I'll go to you, Manu, first. I just wanted to hear your views. In fact, again, I believe since morning we've had quite a few shout-outs for the work Karya is doing. So, so AI, given that has a potential to democratize, we've been talking about democratizing access as well as creating economic opportunity. How can we leverage this potential to bring in new earning and learning opportunities for rural communities, especially with the work that you're doing and what you've been seeing?
Thank you. No, it's such an honor to be here. I think, look, at Karya, we believe very strongly that low-income communities across the globe, especially in India, are excellent builders of AI and excellent beneficiaries of AI, right? So what we have done now over the last 2 years is employ more than 40,000 people to build high-quality multimodal speech data sets, do evaluations, do benchmarking. I've had the honor of working with orgs like Microsoft. We pay our workers at least 20 times the minimum wage. So I see your point on increasing the wages, right? The first time Mr. Karya started as a research project at Microsoft Research in 2017. The very first field visit we did was in a village called Amle in tribal Maharashtra. And this is just 5 hours out of Mumbai, and we showed the phone to someone there, and they looked at it and said, "Iske andar Surya Dev hai," right? Or is the sun god inside this? Because in this village, back in the day, and of course this is no longer the case, nobody had seen, the person you were speaking to hadn't seen a smartphone, right? And once again, by the way, that translates to, is the sun god inside this? Because she had not seen a source of light on a phone before. Within 20 minutes, max to max, she came back to me and she said, "Why did you think this was hard? This was so easy, right? All I have to do is switch on the phone and read out sentences in my mother tongue and build a data set in Marathi, a language I know how to speak," right? Within the first 2 weeks, her name is Reshma. Reshma worked with us. She made more money than her father had made all of last year, right? And again, you see your point of reducing the floor, right? Because she could, from day one, start making money, right? And as she did the work, we upskilled her to do more and more complex tasks. She became the first girl from her community to go to college, and that unlocks amazing things to happen, right? So if you can change who has wealth in society, you can change who has power, you can change who gets opportunities, and that's very, very transformative. I've been really enjoying reading this document. I don't know if Kanishka is in the audience, but Kanishka has put out this document today about future of work for women. The document cites a time use survey study from the government that says over 209 million women in India do not step outside of their home even once in a day. Just for context, 200 million people is more than the population of most countries in the world, right? And that's the number of women in this country that are not stepping outside of their home even once in a day. And when you ask them why, they mention time poverty. Niti Aayog tells us that women spend 10 times more time in the day doing domestic work than men in India do. The men in India contribute the least of any men in the world. The second is social constraints, and the third is limited mobility. And AI work, digital work, bypasses all of these things, right? Our RCT with JPAL shows that digital work can act as a gateway to formal economy jobs. It triples job take-ups among women versus, like physical work, because they can do it when they want, if they want, however they want. And that flexibility that AI is providing, and I think of digital work as both AI work, which is the work Karya is doing, but also AI-enabled work, which is the kind of work that Binny Bansal is doing with this new startup, or the kind of work we've always seen in India, right? These are not new trends, but happening at a pace much faster than they were happening before. And because today 78% of rural Indian households, according to the latest ASR report, have access to a smartphone, right? That changes the things forever. I've been living off a $25 lava phone for the last 2 months. I can do everything of it except for clicking good Instagram photos. I feel like now I'm criticizing lava. I love lava, sorry. but outside of that, my love for taking photos, I can run my code emulator on it. I can do my docs on it. I can do calls on it. And that is the phone that most rural households in this country today have, right? So digital work for me represents our best shot to bring high-paying complex work to communities. And to the point that Shankar sir was making, it also allows us to democratize expertise, democratize access to skilling. And I think it's a very, very exciting time to think about how AI can enable earning and learning opportunities for low-income communities across the global south.
Thank you, Manu. I think this, especially Reshma's example, actually sheds light on, yes, earning and learning, but in a way that it's not as difficult as, when we talk about technology, it seems that it's complex, but it's made it easier for them to adopt and actually move faster towards their earning goals, right? And include them financially. Meg, let's come to you. I know all the work that you've been doing as head of social impact. Everything is around as a platform for us has always been how do we drive a more equitable outcome, and specifically when it comes to now, what are the unique insights that you have been seeing on the platform specifically, and that to what opportunities that job seekers actually need and the barriers that they have to overcome to be able to leverage new opportunities in an AI-driven world?
Yes. Well, LinkedIn's vision is to create economic opportunity for every member of the global workforce, and we are really, really serious about that word, every. We are not in the business of helping people born into opportunity or into the right parents, the right PIN codes, but really everyone, ensuring that they have access to the network's knowledge and skills they need to succeed. So it's something we spend a lot of time thinking about. And when I think about this extraordinary moment we're in, it's that really a once in a lifetime where we can reimagine, rebuild, and redefine what it means to build equitable labor markets for everyone. And I think about the job seekers and the barriers that some of them face. And I see two big barriers that early on we are seeing some features that LinkedIn is building have an impact. And one is what I will call the emotional barrier. So we were with the UN Women yesterday learning about a program that we help support. And we went around, we met a bunch of job seekers who participate in the program. And we asked them what's their favorite feature on LinkedIn and also ideas to improve the platform. And a young woman named Kusama shared with us that her favorite feature, to our surprise, was a nudge, no pun intended, nudge, but a nudge to encourage her to post on the platform. So this is just one of the features we have. And for especially young women who may be a little bit less motivated or worried or anxious, the nudge helps them get over that first hump. So that's one barrier. A second barrier is a barrier to apply for a job. So using an AI-powered feature, we learned this insight that maybe no surprise, that men will apply to jobs that they're only 50% qualified for, but women will only apply to jobs that they're 100% qualified for. So this is a second nudge that we've built into our platform, where if a woman, we know we can infer gender about 99% accuracy. So if a woman's applying for a job, or we see her going through the process, we nudge her if she gets stuck in the process to take that next step and apply to the job. So those are two specific barriers that I think our platform benefits from. And I think the other just opportunity LinkedIn has, or we all have, that AI uniquely brings to us is access to data. I mean, when you look back through history and all these moments of labor revolutions, way back the agrarian revolution, the industrial revolution, the information revolution, we did not have access to the data we have now. But this is kind of a meta thought, but because of AI, we have access to extraordinary amounts of data to let us know the impact that AI is having on labor markets, to let us know and inform so we know where to invest, but also to hold all of us accountable to making sure that we are locking arms in this one moment in time that we have together, to make sure that it's not just the yachts that are benefiting from this moment, but it's all boats in the harbor.
Now it's thank you, Meg. In fact, what we've just kind of heard from everyone was more we wanted to paint a picture around understanding what are the future possibilities. Let's kind of get into understanding, and Meg, you've kind of spoken about overcoming barriers. Let's actually go a little deeper into challenges that we need to address. So Shankar, coming back to you, can you actually share a little more in terms of when we talk about scale and the kind of work you're doing? walk us through what are the challenges that you foresee when we talk about using AI as a force for good.
Sure. I'll talk of maybe 3 challenges. There are many more, but I'll focus on 3. First, it's easy to get a pilot in AI and to show in a lab or in a small setting, wow, great results. But for a country of the scale, diversity, and complexity of India, to scale it is a different challenge altogether. I'll give you a few examples. A teacher in class has to have the power of generative AI to solve a question she's asking, the answer to which lies in 3 or 4 policy documents in English. She might be a Bengali teacher, right? At that point, how do you leverage generative AI while having systemic accountability and the teacher not relinquishing her role to a computer, right? So designing for what works at scale means getting institutions together, getting human accountability systems together, and then seeing how technology can fit into their lives rather than them fitting into the life of technology. This exercise took us 6 months, working closely with Ministry of Education, some states, and the result is actually an NCRT bot that does this. But the biggest question was, what's the balance between the creativity of AI and the accountability of the teacher, right? So without going into the details, designing, whether it be that or something else as Aug we are working with government of Tamil Nadu, personalized learning for disadvantaged kids, where after figuring out what will work at scale, the answer surprisingly was what will work at scale is the creation of safe spaces for unmotivated learners to learn how to read. Even if children in grade 6 who cannot read, how do you sit in a class the whole day? Because you have been labeled as a slow learner, put in a different section, right? So creating safe spaces which allows the child to now get motivated is a powerful role of personalized AI learning. Because after that, once you have a motivated learner, they can figure out other tools. So thinking about designing for scale and not scaling up what works is a huge challenge. It takes much longer time than we would think, easier to build technology, but having conversations with policy guys, with bureaucrats, with not-for-profits, with for-profits, to see the infrastructure that is there, understand the child's mind, understand at scale, are you unleashing some unintended consequences? Designing for scale is first. Second, any new technology is based on the power, right? So electricity, if you don't have power, it doesn't work. In AI, it is data, especially local language data, which in India, we do not have. And organizations like Karya have taken the first step to show it can be done, right? And as Aug, we have funded IIT Madras to collect Indian language data and put it out as a public good, which therefore can be used either by Sarkar, for example, Bhashini, or by Bazaar, say Sarvam, or even Samaj, like Karya, right? They're adding to it, they're building of it. Creating this digital public good of data and making it available, right, is a massive challenge. We have so many languages, right? But again, clever design will help us to solve it. Without it, we are being penny wise and pound foolish. So getting our own data in our own languages. And third, obvious, and Manish is a bigger expert, the laws have to change. A lot of our current laws are legacies of a 60, 70-year-old thing, right? We changed our Telecom Act 150 years after it was created. So technology has a way of running far ahead of not just society, but of the institutional framework. And that gap will create tension. How we navigate that gap is going to be a third big challenge. But there are many, but I don't want to paint a gloomy picture. Overall, we are in good shape.
No, it does. It's not gloomy, at least with the kind of solutions you've come up with. I think one of those which you've often spoken about, you spoke about it right now also, around providing solutions where people are instead of making that change management much bigger for them. So creating those spaces, and if learners or school-going children in India study from textbooks, creating those QR codes there. And I really like the point you actually made about safe spaces. That's such a big one. Otherwise, you have unmotivated learners, and how much ever technology you use, it's not going to be adopted. So adoption of that is so important. Thank you. Puneet, when we talk about scale, of course, what's most important is when we talk about responsible AI. So responsible AI is increasingly becoming very crucial. It's a big focus globally. And there is obviously always concerns around ethics, privacy, and bias. So given Microsoft's leadership in AI and its commitment specifically when it comes to the India AI mission, how is Microsoft ensuring that all AI innovations are developed and deployed responsibly?
I think before I go, I just plus one to Shankar's 3 challenges. I think the first one, one thing we have as technologists, we have to remind ourselves, don't build technology for the sake of technology, solve problems, and thank you for reinforcing that just fully with you. I think on responsible AI, the first thing I'll say, Ruchi, is when you're building technologies that can change the world, you have to make sure that they work in a responsible way, right? I think none of us can wash our hands and say, listen, I don't get this or I can't do this. I think the responsibility is ours. And especially in AI, I've never seen a technology which is so popular and so misunderstood, quite honestly. Right? In my life, I've been in technology for 25 years. But especially in AI, responsibility can't be an afterthought, right? So as you're building AI, how do you build this in products, right? Like you're doing, and at least at Microsoft, we're basing it on a set of principles, transparency, inclusiveness, privacy, security, like by design, by default, not as an afterthought. The other thing I'll say is none of us have all the answers, right? And that's where I think this ecosystem needs to come together, right? This is, to Shankar's point, this is general purpose technology, like electricity. Like there's nobody who owns electricity or power, right? So this entire ecosystem, and to your point and Manish's point around tech companies and startups and the government and NGOs, we all need to figure this out together. So I think the more the ecosystem can come together, the better it would be. Third is constant education, right? Just like anybody who's on the internet now knows, don't believe everything you see and hear on the internet, but some of us still do, right? And this technology has the ability to confuse people, which is not, so how do you constantly educate people? Watermarking content and so I think those 3 things. First is responsibility not as an afterthought by default. Second, I think all of us coming together in the ecosystem and pushing each other, and to Shankar's point, right, just raising the bar on each other. Third is constant education, because the real public is not in this room, right? And you can't let them be confused in a country like India. So how do we constantly educate?
Yeah, that's very true. In fact, that's exactly, so important. I think both what you and Shankar have said, Shankar also spoke about, it's about personalizing, but also not just scaling what's working, but also looking at what's modern. And to your point, Puneet, it's about building responsible, like talking about these principles right when we are building, not as an afterthought. It's so important. Meg, coming to you, we spoke about the skill shift. I spoke about how skills have shifted for the same job by 25% and slated to go up by almost 70%. So for a lot of us, I think this change has happened gradually, but we didn't really feel it. We knew it's happening, but somehow now it feels very different. So why do you think that, what makes this moment right now of change so urgent?
Yes, I think it's exactly what you just said, is the speed of change. Yeah. Or like we say, the shelf life of skills has never been shorter. And so what that means is that we have to make sure these feedback loops are even shorter and tighter to make sure that the industry demand skills, that information is getting cascaded down to educational institutions, to job seekers, so they understand the skills they need to get the jobs that are in most demand. But it isn't just a skills problem to be solved. I think one of the things I was really struck by yesterday in talking to job seekers, especially young women, is yes, getting upskilled is necessary, but it's not sufficient. We also have to address a number of cultural and societal considerations. What we heard from a lot of the women who had gone through the training program and were still looking for a job is the barriers were not the skill barrier. The barriers were, in some cases, location. Like the jobs that they wanted were simply too far away. I think one of the panelists referred to that this morning. Or a barrier is the parents don't want them to get a job. So there's just a number of things that I don't want us to walk away thinking that the skills is a silver bullet, that simply upskilling, which by the way is a big enough problem in and of itself, is the only way forward, that we really do need, to your point, an ecosystem of private sector, government, nonprofits working together to make sure that we're providing the services, the surround sound services, to make sure individuals are equipped to get the jobs out there.
Absolutely, Meg. I think you spoke about it in the morning as well around also aspirations. So one is, you know, their worldview is so limited, so they're not kind of thinking big or, you know, what is possible. And I think, you know, ma'am's here, Ahuja ma'am, you spoke about it in terms of access to even transport and safety for women also kind of comes in, but definitely these are important factors. Manu, you actually, when you gave Reshma's example, you actually spoke about how it wasn't that tough, right? But that's one case. There could be different. Training and development can often be challenging when actually you look at it from a scale perspective, especially when you're preparing workers for more complex digital tasks. So since you've been focusing a lot on upskilling your workers to handle these tasks, how does a company, I mean, what advice would you give, and how does a company approach training and development to ensure that their workers are adequately prepped for this increasing, you know, sophisticated AI tasks and changing skills?
Got it. So I think at Karya, our mission is to use AI to build accelerated pathways out of poverty, right? There is a 2019 study that says that it takes an average poor person in India 7 generations of labor to get to $1,500 in savings. So the average poor person will have to work for 200 years to get to $1,500 in savings. This is a 2019 study, so things might have, of course, improved. And that to me is horrifying, right? So if the goal is, how do I get someone to $1,500 savings as quickly as possible? Today, there are digital tasks that pay $30 an hour, right? 99.5% of India makes less than $30 a day, right? Again, those are 2020 numbers, so things might have improved. But still, the point stands, right? Today, Karya workers enter at level 1, right? So think of digital work as different levels. They enter at level 1. At level 1, we pay them our minimum wage, which is $5 an hour, 20 times the national minimum wage mandate. And they do simple tasks like reading out sentences in their mother tongue, which is the Reshma story I was talking about. After they do that task, we upskill them to level 2, which is the work we have had the honor of doing with Meti and Google with Project Vani, where they're looking at images and they're talking about the images. So they're doing like spontaneous speech data collection. That task pays a little bit more. Then there's a level 3 task that pays a little bit more. There's a level 4 task and we keep on upskilling them level to level. Working with Microsoft Research, we have just done one of the largest multilingual evaluations of LLM models. That task is a level 20 task, and this is all publicly available, all these levels and stuff like that, right? And today, what we are interested in studying is how do I upskill someone from level 1 to level 2? What are those skilling modules on the phone? But more importantly, what we have learned is if we pay people for skilling, like if we pay them for the time it takes them to be able to do a level 2, level 3 task, we break that hurdle, right? Because if I am saying, okay, to go from level 5 to level 20, you need 10 hours of practice, just doing this work. Can I pay you for those 10 hours at the same wage that level 20 will actually pay? So level 20 pays $25 an hour, let's say. A little bit more than that, actually. But can I pay you upfront for that and incentivize you to do that? And obviously, no surprise, that works really well, right? Because for the communities of people we are working with, time is a huge investment. We work with people, 60% workers are women, 95% come from economically marginalized communities. It is really, really important to them to see immediate value. It makes sense, right? So I think we are able to show that we can do that. The second thing we are seeing is we are doing digital skill passports on level, so they can then take those passports and they can be like, I did LLM evaluation for Microsoft Research, and my data was accepted by Microsoft. Why should another data company not hire me? Why should it stay limited to just one organization like ours, right? And then what I want to do is bring other AI-enabled work, right? Because this, again, is just a small piece of the digital work pile, right? There are companies that pay for surveying, there are companies that are doing other things. Can those be companies that get onto this and we can share these incredible people who are being trained to do this work, right? I just believe fundamentally nothing succeeds like success. So when we see our communities receive these wages, word spreads out, right? What we've always seen naturally what happens in our communities is the first round of people who make money from Karya, they go about telling other people that, oh, it works, it's a real thing, you could do this too. And they start training each other, right? Indians, we're such a, I feel like our strength of our society, we're so convivial in how we make decisions, right? So we are so aspirational. So often it's the youngest people in a community who get Karya first because they're, of course, digitally savvy. And then I've seen cases of the oldest worker we've had in Karya is an 84-year-old uncle, probably won't like me calling him uncle, but 84-year-old person who was trained by his grandson to do the work, right? And I remember him telling me that, अच्छा ज़माना आ गया है, पहले हम आपको पैसे देते थे कि आप हमें इंग्लिश सिखाओ, अब आप पैसे दे रहे हो कि आप हमसे मराठी सीखोगे, which is basically, I used to pay money to learn English back in the day, and now you're paying us money to learn my language, right? So tables have really turned, and I think there's some power and beauty in that. Yeah.
Wonderful, great example. So in short, you were also saying incentivizing them, letting them see that success breeds success, and with those passports, if you may, it's more like giving them something to prove, or accreditation of this is what the work that they're doing, and it's growing. I do have another set of questions which is more around what roles can we play and what next. But I also wanted to just remind the audience that if you have any questions, please kind of, okay, we already have started getting questions. If there are more, please kind of scan this QR code. So let's do that. Let me actually just take some of the audience questions, and then if required, I'll come back to mine. All right, maybe, these are not directed to anyone in particular. I'll see if there are any specific ones. But so this question is, will AI overtake us at workplace and rest in the hands of only a few? I know this is a lot on top of minds for people. Will it be a cause for massive layoffs? Because if anyone gets their hands on this, it creates disparities. So more supply than demand. Any of you, maybe, Puneet, you want to go?
I know, just I want to pass it back to Manish. But my personal take on this, right? I think there are two camps on this, right? There's a utopian, there's a dystopian. There's one camp believes that AI is for building Christmas cards. There's another camp who believes that AI will take over and we won't have jobs. I think both are massively wrong. I think, to me, at least in a country like India, and Manish said this beautifully, right? Hamara kya bigaad loge, right? Which is, it's a great leveler, right? So if you look at talent shifts, and Manish was right, these are not normal curves, right? But if the people who are below average in terms of current skills and capabilities and earning can move towards the right, and then the median moves further right towards superstars, it's a real opportunity. Going back to the hospital example, right? Every hospital in the country you go to you still have queues, right? Every cinema you go to, you have queues. In this country, there's always queues, right? And if you can bring intelligence, if you can reduce the cost of intelligence, if you can level and democratize this, get people access. This is like lean for manufacturing, this is lean for intelligence. So I think in a country like India, where we're not short of work to do and not short of dreams and ambitions, and what Karya is doing as an example, I think it's a massive opportunity for us to really lead the world. I wouldn't worry too much right now about the impact on our work. There's a saying, right? People will not lose jobs to AI, people will lose jobs to people who know AI. So my only call to action is learn. Start learning now.
Thanks, Puneet. There are some more questions directed at you, but I'll come to you later. All right, maybe, Shankar, I don't know if you want to take this. There's a question around how effectively are Indian universities teaching AI and ML, more around, I think, education and taking this at scale. So countries like US have already started providing courses. There's a large flow of Indian students to such universities. So essentially around how do we kind of, what's your view around education, formal education?
We've off to a good start, but we have a long way to go. The mistake a lot of universities make is to think of this as one more technology, right? Not realizing what is the fundamental disruptive nature, right? And then there's obviously a lot of insecurity. It's no similar from when Google first came. Teachers could no longer walk into class thinking they are the know-all. Because one search query by the child, the teacher is found short. Teacher had to reinvent the game, right? Here, whatever assignment you give the child, you know AI being used, right? So there is a reimagination required of if reasoning is a commodity. For example, 40 years ago, I don't know, so what is that? Manish, that log thing we used to use to calculate? Yeah, log table. So there used to be a table that you used to calculate and also something, right? Before calculator came, the big debate was, should we allow children to use calculators or not, right? That debate was solved. It doesn't matter, right? So should we allow children to use AI for learning or not is, I think, not the wisest of debates. Tool is there, I will use it, right? So, but if Google knows everything, should I teach children knowledge or should I teach them conceptuals and how to learn, right? In a way, the Google search revolution was all about that. Knowledge is a commodity. What happens when reasoning is a commodity? Could I write an essay and use AI to critique the essay and give me marks? So the question is now, what's the role of the professor, right? These are complex questions. So to go back, we have made a good start, but like with any disruptive technology, we ain't seen nothing yet, right? How will future education systems look like? What's the role of the teacher? What's the role of the content? Because now content, which was earlier expensive, is pretty much free. Personalized content, which was expensive, will be free. The role of the professor might actually go back to what it was, guru's role. Ask the right questions, and it'll be a 10-15-year journey before we can answer that.
And I think that's exactly why we say, right, technology is a big leveler, because those barriers in that way can be taken away. And as much as it is for students, it's teaching assistants, right? I mean, teachers getting better prepared in that way. I think there are examples of what Khan Academy is doing with their Khan Migo and, and the likes. So, of course, for sure. Okay, so the other question is, when majority of our country struggles with functional literacy, are we saying that we can build platforms of equity for AI availability irrespective of literacy? And how do we manage the intersectionality? Maybe. Manu?
Looking at you now.
Yeah.
I think, one of my favorite books in the tech for good space is a book called Geek Heresy by Kintaro Toyama, the professor at University of Michigan, and the person who set up the Microsoft Research Lab in Bangalore. Kintaro says that technology amplifies existing human intent and capacity. It is not a substitute. And in the book, it's a book that, if some of you read, is quite depressing. So I would immediately suggest some other books to read after, so that you don't just become sad. But it is an important book. It goes through over 100 failures of tech for good initiatives in the pre-AI stage. But he calls himself a recovering technoholic, like someone just addicted to using technology as a solution to social problems. And he called his previous worldview just very techno-utopian. The conversation around AI is a little techno-utopian today. I've attended many meetings where the person in front of me is saying things that I'm like, I don't think so. That's gonna. I mean, recently someone was like, AI will change, gender issues in India. And I'm like, these are very deeply, these are deep issues that we need to do the hard work of solving. Technology can amplify intent and capacity. It cannot substitute it, right? And if the intent and capacity do not exist, technology can't do much, right? Now, what gives me hope is we work in 27 of the 28 states in India. Everywhere I have traveled, I've seen the intent to get out of poverty, the intent to make some. Indians are so aspirational. Anyone who works in rural India will tell you how aspirational our people are, right? And they're willing to work hard to build that capacity. We might need AI plus solutions, where of course we have a tech side of it, but we need to have some human element to build that capacity if that capacity does not exist. So to answer your question, it seems like the question is talking about missing capacities. We will have to do that hard work. I think AI can help accelerate that journey. It cannot be the only solution, is a very fair point to make. And if I think of the best solutions I have seen, so like Digital Green to me is a phenomenal example in India of a tech for good intervention. They have something called Farmer Chat. It's an agricultural extension AI solution. Look at how they use AI and where they use government workers, the agricultural extension workers, right? Their fundamental philosophy is amplify the middleman, don't replace the middleman, right? Give the middleman AI, right? I mean, there's so many, for example, KHPT, Karnataka Health Promotion Trust, is currently working on a chatbot for ASHA workers. So ASHA workers can serve their beneficiaries better. Nobody's saying replace the people who do this work, because I think they're essential, right? But I think we can use AI to democratize access to expertise, to the point that Puneet is making. So I think there's a balance there which is important.
If I could just add to this point, right, and I completely agree with everything Manu said. I think we don't know a lot of things about AI, but one thing we know is the learning curve is not as steep as it used to be. So I started learning tech 30 years ago. I started coding. I started with C, C++. Like for 2 years, I remember I was coding and just creating games. I was very happy when I created this game where the snake ladder was moving. It took me 2 years to get there. Now my IQ is low, but leave that aside. Today, like I was teaching my kids coding for the last 5 years. They now come and kick my ass saying, Papa, you wasted our time. Like, I don't need to learn coding now. Computers have learned our language, right? You can talk to a machine now. So I think that has profound implications. And I tell my teams all the time, right? Just the opposite of knowledge on AI is not ignorance, it's the illusion of knowledge. Like, I try and spend half an hour every day learning. It's not enough by a mile. And we're doing enough, right? As Microsoft, we're training 2 million people on AI, all of that stuff. In fact, last week we launched a Microsoft micro degree on AI with the Ministry of Skills, where there's 1,600 hours of deep AI content available to everybody. Now, you're right, the problems in India, we have to get it to the people it matters in every city, every village. But it's much easier to start learning. You'll never be a guru in this because this is changing every day. But don't hold back, is my only push saying, start learning now. It's not like coding 30 years ago.
That's true. I know we're just getting at time. There's one last question for you, Meg. Are there any specific products for non-profits built by LinkedIn? So anything around that, maybe for the audience?
Sure. I mean, nonprofits are, they're a bedrock to this whole ecosystem, and we're grateful to partner with a whole bunch. But one actual example I wanted to mention, I'm seeing some nonprofits build, which I think is an extraordinary tool, leveraging AI to create a more equitable labor market, is back to what you were referencing, that so many young people can't even imagine what to be. And these career navigation tools that we are watching being built, I think are extraordinarily powerful to unleash human potential. So, I remember talking to a job seeker a couple of years ago who was saying to me, look, I have a lot of agency, but I didn't even know to Google data scientist because I didn't know a data scientist was a thing. Now, if I knew it was a thing, I could Google it, I could, be resourceful. But without knowing it was a thing, if I'm not born into a network or into a community where these people have these jobs, how am I supposed to know? So I think these career navigation tools that I'm seeing a whole bunch of nonprofits build that are leveraging sources of data so that you can imagine and you answer, I don't know about where you go, what the career services resource centers are like in India, but in the US, they're terrible. And so really, really being able to leverage AI tools to massively unleash human potential, I think is maybe one of the biggest opportunities out there, and I think nonprofits can help lead the way.
Wonderful, thanks. Shankar, if you can just close us out, bring us home with, I know you talk about the role India can play as far as, the leader across the globe to show that how we innovate and we kind of come up with solutions at scale. Maybe just a few closing thoughts on that.
Yeah, sure. India's problems are so complex, and technologies like AI give us an opportunity to build on what we've been doing over the last 15 years, which is, again, Manish alluded to it, which is Sarkar, Samaj, Bazaar, each coming in and doing their job properly. UIDI, UPI, some of the digital infrastructure are examples where the government provides the first push, the investments that not-for-profits cannot or markets won't because there's no money to be made. And then they take it to a point where now the market comes and innovates on top. So the role of markets to innovate, the role of governments to create that infrastructure, the role of society to fill in the gaps, right? We have demonstrated that again and again. I think that is very much needed now more than ever. Technology is going to race faster than all three. right? Markets will chase technology fastest because they can make money. Government will chase that first to make sure that it's within guardrails. Society has to make sure that all of these two actors are living within what is permissible in society, right? Horrible incidents at workplace, we will not tolerate it anymore, right? So given all of this, the way India has a unique advantage in addition to young demographic, we know technology is a great leveler. It does not discriminate caste, creed, economic thing, right? It does not know that the person in the ATM withdrawing money, is he a billionaire or a car driver? And it treats them equally. That is huge. So the last 50 years, we have seen as a population, we prefer technology because it has done good for us. If AI is a powerful technology, it therefore is a logical extension that we will showcase to the world how society can benefit managing the harm. By 2030, I see that as happening, right? Thus far, over the last 20, 30 years, I think Manish said, India was interesting but not important, right? Over the last 30 years, we became a country that others looked to. But I think in AI, 15, 20 years after, the first revolution where we are at the starting point. In 20 years, the world will look up to India on how it has leapfrogged using technology, the way we've leapfrogged various digital things like telephones and digital identity. I'm an optimist. There are several challenges, and a lot of people here are working on it, but we should not miss the AI revolution.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. I hope you all agree when I said that we're not just going to walk away with a lot of inspiration, but also a lot of confidence and hope that, yes, India is not just interesting, but very, very important. Thank you. Thank you, everyone, for being a wonderful audience, and thank you, all the panelists. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you, panel, for an invigorating conversation. I must also acknowledge the audience for asking questions that elicited such wonderful responses from our panel. Thank you very much. We will now break for 10 minutes and reconvene for the last and final session for the day today. Thank you. See you in 10.